Okay. I really enjoyed reading the discussion board this week. A lot of you talked about um, the concept of a mosaic, and I found that super moving in the video. This idea that we're not a melting pot where all our distinctions and our unique characteristics from our background disappear, but instead the diversity of different groups is beautiful. But then with America, we have these many tiles and glass pieces that each are unique, but then together they form this wonderful, diverse image. I like that metaphor a lot. It's a lot more meaningful to me than the one of the melting pot where everybody assimilates and becomes the same. I think that that's what happened with my ancestors. They came over to the United States and they just blended in, which is what happens to some extent as we become American, but all the distinctions that they brought with them from Europe are gone. I don't have them. We don't know anybody in Europe that's related to us. So anyways, that was it. I wanted to mention that. I also wanted to mention that today is Indigenous Peoples Day. It is a week, and SDSU has a week to celebrate this week. It's a week of action. Today, you can learn about the kickoff celebration. The speaker is Professor Lynch. I know her. I've worked with her in the Writing Center, and she was a graduate of the RWS Master's Program. I think you would really enjoy this. We're moving into our next essay, which will be looking at all the various pieces that make up America and how we can be, like the values we can reflect, the values that we want to strengthen in America. We will be asking, what is America? What does it mean to be American? And some of these events, virtual events on campus, might actually help you think about issues that you want to address in this next essay. And again, thank you for your discussion board posts. They were super interesting, super moving. Every one of us offers a unique perspective, and that unique perspective is based on our identities, our experiences, and our beliefs, and together we get a clearer picture of America. I have to caution us, though, as we move into this section, that sometimes our different identities, our different experiences, our different beliefs can butt up against each other. And we do need to hear the various stories, but we want to acknowledge those stories, honor different perspectives, and not fall into what we see in larger America, which is polarized disagreement. This has to be different in this classroom in order for us to really develop that mosaic, really learn from each other. We can't just dismiss other people's perspectives. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. Your discussion posts really show that you are honoring other perspectives. And so I don't think that'll be an issue, but I did need to caution us, be respectful. It's sort of like, none of you mentioned this, but your posts made me think of this parable of the blind men and the elephant. Some of you might be familiar with it. It's this concept that it's from India. It's an ancient parable very, very old. And this is an image that was painted centuries ago. But here's how the parable goes. There are 5 blind men, and they learn about elephants, but obviously none of them have ever seen an elephant. They don't understand the concept of an elephant. And so they have an opportunity to meet an elephant. And each one encounters the elephant using their fingers because their fingers become their eyes. And by touching the elephant, they can get a perspective on the elephant. And one of them touches the elephant's side and says it's like a wall. One of them touches the tail and says, this is like the horse tail. Another one touches the trunk and it seems like a snake. And another one touches the legs and it seems like a tree trunk. And together, these blind men have a perspective of the elephant. But obviously, and you have all seen elephants, obviously, each of their perspectives individually is way off. It's only in combining their perspectives that they get a true picture of what an elephant is. And that's the importance of hearing all our stories, of reviewing what other people have said about America in those contexts, and with what you know, doing research over a period of time and considering your own perspective. It's only then that we'll get a true picture of what America was, what America is, and what America can be. So that is where we're headed with our next essay. The prompt is up on Canvas, and it's possible we'll have some time to talk about it today, but it's also possible that we will not. I'm guessing we will not have time to talk about it today because the rest of the things are going to take a little bit of time. I want to talk about other things that are less exciting than our topic, where we're headed, but they are also relevant. I want to talk about citations. I want to review the precis and the rhetorical strategy. I have an example from our class that is showing a lot of the features that I want to see as you do this. I also want to discuss deductive and inductive reasoning, which are strategies and which are ways to analyze logos. And I want to introduce the next reading, which is by Eric Liu, who you met in the video from last week. So let's get started. Let's talk about citations first. Least exciting thing. It won't take long. This is the pattern that you should be using to cite academic journals that have a print copy as well as an online presence. You'll notice last name, comma, first name, period, the title of the text in quotation marks, the title of the journal, comma, the volume number, the edition number, the page range, the URL, and then accessed day, month, year. It's pretty easy, but finding the information can be challenging. Sometimes you will encounter something like this that doesn't include all the information. Definitely, you can get the page range. There's 347 all the way to 362. And so you can get the page range. You can also get the title of the journal. And it says TETYC, but a quick Google search will reveal that's Teaching English in the Two-Year College. But from this PDF, you can't get the volume or the edition. That doesn't mean they don't exist. And so it does mean that you need to do a little bit of work in order to find it. So if I Google teaching the conventions of academic discourse in quotation marks, along with the author's name, I will end up with a site like this. And now I can find the volume, the edition. And that allows me to put all the information in there. Most of the time, if you access your journal articles through the library, all of that information will be readily available. But sometimes you'll access it through Google, and you don't have all that information readily available. This is what your final journal article or citation will look like. Here's Tony, comma, Teresa, the title in quotation marks, period, the title of the journal, volume, number, date, page range, URL. Notice that I'm removing the hyperlink. Part of it is that enables me to break it apart and keep the spacing correct. And part of it is just because that URL is not supposed to be in there. And then I put accessed, day, month, year that I accessed it. Any questions about the citations? You're going to see that I'm requiring these increasingly. You will be creating a citation for Eric Liu. Eric Liu's article was not published in an academic journal. So you're going to want to think about, how do you cite a magazine? You won't have page numbers. What do you do with that? I gave you some sites you can go to. Certainly you can access it through the library, and the library will create the citation for you. Google is also offering citation help. Just Google, how do I find citations through Google? And then of course, you can go to Purdue OWL. All of those are helpful. It is important that you learn how to do this. Why? Because some upper division professors are very, very picky about citations. Not all of them, but some are. And so it's useful for me to train you in that right now. But also, your ability to do this signals to your audiences that you belong to this academic writing community and that you fit in, and so it helps you build ethos. Any other questions before I move on? So everybody, I have 8 more rhetorical précis and strategies to read. All of you are receiving full credit. That isn't because you all did everything perfectly. It's just because I want to give you full credit on these. I want you to put forth your best effort. And for now, that best effort is going to earn full credit. That won't always be the case. Good job following the précis template. Everybody had 4 unique sentences that followed the patterns. That doesn't mean they were all perfect précis. It just means for the first time around, you all did a great job following the template. Regarding the argument, with academic writing, authors create explicit argument statements, which means they often say, I argue that. And when you can identify the argument explicitly in the text, you have to ask yourself, does my paraphrase really reflect the statement that the author makes. In many cases, it did not. It was something else entirely, or it was part of the argument, not the full argument. You're going to notice that a lot of times academic writers, when they put forth an argument, it isn't just a claim that there are 6 universal features in academic writing. No, she had multiple parts. There are 6 universal features, and teaching these to first-year students will help them succeed as they move through the university. That's the main argument, and it includes 2 main claims and a so what. Why does it matter? If that's the author's argument explicitly, you have to find that a way to put that into your own words. The other thing that I noticed is not everybody was identifying the primary audience correctly. And that's important. Toni was not writing to first-year college students. She wasn't even writing to all scholars. She was writing to people who teach first-year writing classes, specifically in a 2-year college, although I think she would argue that her primary audience was anybody who teaches first-year writing. And you have to think about, how does the author want the audience to respond? She wants them to respond by teaching these conventions in a way that's meaningful to first-year students. The other thing that I want to mention is that when authors are using rhetorical strategies, they're not just there to be there. They're not just there to inform the audience. Their function is to persuade the audience to embrace the author's argument. And when you're analyzing the strategies, you need to move beyond informing or even just showing that the author knows, is credible because they've done the reading, they've done the research. It's persuasion. Remember, Toni is writing to academic writers. They all have done the research. They all use big names and authorities in their writing. They all use lots of evidence. So just saying they have evidence or they use big names and so they seem credible isn't going to be enough to persuade the audience. You have to really think, why is this particular big name or authority persuasive to this audience? Or why is the evidence persuasive to this audience? So when you're analyzing, choose strategies that actually work to persuade, because that's the type of analysis that you're required to do. So I mentioned that I have an example from the class, and this was a really good example. You're going to see that some elements are exactly what I was looking for, and then some elements are almost exactly what I was looking for. And so I contacted the author and I said, hey, I think you did a really good job. Can I use this? And the author said yes. And I'm really, really grateful, because it gives me the opportunity to talk about what the author did really well, and then some other areas that the author could have expanded in and strengthened the analysis. So specifically in the strategy. And this is pretty typical. And so I thought it was a great opportunity. And again, I want to emphasize that this author is doing some really good work. So this is the précis the author wrote. And you're going to see, why do I have this in 4 colors? Not because that's aesthetically pleasing, but because it separates each of the 4 sentences and makes it easier for us to follow. So in her article titled Teaching the Conventions of Academic Discourse, published in Teaching English in the 2-Year College, English professor Teresa Toney discusses the shared characteristics of academic writing and argues that by teaching them to first-year students, the students will be prepared to excel and succeed through their later university years. Very nice paraphrase of Toney's argument statement. You'll notice that the author actually divides that argument statement into two parts. And so part of it is in what the author discusses, and part of it is the rest of the argument. And I think that's a really nice way to do that. That's a strategy I often use when I'm writing that sentence. The second sentence is very good also. She supports this claim by listing the most common characteristics of academic writing, providing examples of where the characteristics are present in other scholars' work, and warranting how the characteristics, as seen through examples, will aid in the first-year student's success in the future of their academic career. Now, you'll notice I left out these two adjectives, strong and well-educated. I think those don't add a great deal to the sentence. Generally speaking, academic writing removes subjective adjectives. These aren't bad, they just are less representative of academic writing. And I thought I would point that out. This sentence, Toney's purpose is to inform her audience of educators about common similarities found within academic writing in order to persuade them to teach their students this concept with the hope of it strengthening their ability to succeed throughout the rest of their education. This sentence is doing the things that I want a sentence like this to do. You'll notice that there are lots of thems and theirs, and the antecedent changes, and that can make it hard to follow, but that's an easy fix. And as the author heard me read this aloud, the author probably thought, that's a little bit confusing. The only other thing I would say is this idea of inform. I want to push you to be more descriptive in your writing. And so the author could have said, Toney's purpose is to describe common similarities found within academic writing. And so it's like, what is the author doing to inform? So it's a little more descriptive. The author does an excellent job on this last sentence. Toney adopts an unbiased and professional tone in order to persuade her audience of educators, of first-year college students who strive to best prepare their pupils for the challenges of academic writing. This author really gets at the description of that primary audience, what their shared concerns are, touching on the underlying assumption that Toney has about that primary audience. Before I move on to talk about the strategy, any questions about the rhetorical précis? You can be asking general questions or questions based on your own, what you did in your paper. Okay. Here's the strategy paragraph. And there are some things this author does very, very well, and then some areas of analysis that I think the author could have expanded. Teresa Toney uses the rhetorical strategy of example. The author could have used the word exemplification, but example also works prominently throughout teaching the conventions of academic discourse. Through using a multitude of varying academic journals that stem from several different genres and topics, Toney is able to develop herself as a credible resource on the topic of education. For each common characteristic she lists, Toney provides 3 quotations, each a different academic journal, of where the characteristic is prominent. This can be seen, for example, when she considers the characteristic of an academic writer's ability to accept a reader's right to disagree. She leads into how they will use hedges by offering quotes from a sports medicine journal and a psychology journal, leading with the statement that in each quote, examples of hedges are italicized in the following sentences. By providing these strong examples, Tony not only establishes her argument well by providing a vast array of evidence, but she also establishes herself as a credible source. Now, I think the author did a very nice job of describing what Teresa was doing, or Tony was doing, by example, 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 the italics, and how those examples functioned in the text. The author could have provided and should have provided in-text documentation when the author quoted Tony, but we haven't really talked about that yet, and I just wanted to add that while we're talking about it right now. The author then focuses on how using lots of evidence appeals to ethos by backing up every claim Tony makes with highly credible sources and deems herself as trustworthy, allowing her audience of educators to be more open to listen to her argument. By providing highly educated examples from varying subjects of academic journals, she develops herself as an extremely reliable and credible source, and that makes her more persuasive. Definitely it does that. But there's something else that providing all these varying examples does. First of all, one of the ways Tony appeals to ethos here is by providing multiple disciplines and random examples, which shows that Tony wasn't biased. She was fair in choosing these. And her lack of bias is something more than the fact that she has lots of evidence, which all scholars would have, that develops her ethos. But there's another appeal that Tony is making through the use of exemplification. And the appeal she's making is logos, which is to use logic or reasoning to make the argument seem true. And I wanted, because the author had done such a great job setting up this use of examples and had touched on ethos, I thought it would be valuable to demonstrate how there is another appeal at work here. Now, in previous classes, you've probably discussed deductive and inductive reasoning. Deductive is from general, like all things, down to specific. You can look at what all things are, and if something fits within that category of all things, something specific, you can draw a conclusion. Inductive reasoning goes from specific to general. So this is deductive reasoning. It operates with a syllogism, a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion. And this is an example that's often used. All humans are mortal is the major premise, means every human being is going to die at some point. It is true. Socrates is a human. So if all humans are mortal and Socrates is a human, therefore Socrates will die, and he did. And that's how a syllogism works. All to specific. And it only works if both premises are true. Here's an example I used to use of deductive reasoning. All dogs love to chew on bones. Major premise, Cheddar, my puggle, is a dog. Minor premise, Therefore, Cheddar loves to chew on bones. Now that made perfect sense to me. Cheddar was the only dog I had ever had, and he loved to chew on bones, and I assumed that all dogs love to chew on bones. My students, when I showed them this picture, told me that the major premise wasn't true. Their dogs did not love to chew on bones. Most dogs did, but not all dogs. And so this example of deductive reasoning was false because the major premise was false. However, we could say most dogs love to chew on bones. Cheddar is a dog, therefore Cheddar probably would love to chew on bones. And so by using hedges, we can draw conclusions. Inductive reasoning works the opposite direction. So if we experience something and we assume that that something is a pattern or it's common, we can draw conclusions, especially if we experience something more than once. So inductive reasoning is a common method for arguing, especially when the conclusion is an obvious probability, like with Cheddar. And most of the time the reasoning works, but it can also lead us in the wrong direction. So to illustrate that, I have this lovely pattern over here, 10, 20, 30, 40, and your brain probably automatically goes to 50. Inductive reasoning is really, really helpful for us. But if I had one more example and it was 10, 20, 30, 40, 80, you'd go, I need more examples. I need more of the pattern in order to know what the next one in the pattern is. And so we can see that inductive reasoning, identifying patterns, doesn't always lead us in the proper direction. It does most of the time. It's really, really useful. But we have to look at lots and lots of patterns. So here's Cheddar again, balancing a Ritz cracker on his head. And if I say Cheddar will balance food on his head, which he will, he does that because he knows eventually if he balances on his head, we'll say, good boy, and then he can bounce it off, catch it in his mouth, and we will let him eat it. And otherwise, he will not be allowed to eat it. If he does it, like if he bounces it off his head, we will stop him. So Cheddar will balance food on his head. Cheddar is a dog, therefore, and we really can't draw any conclusions based on that because, yeah, not all dogs will balance food on their head. Very few dogs will balance food on their head. So it doesn't work from specific to general. What kind of reasoning are we seeing with the examples in Teresa Toney's text? Micah, what kind of reasoning are we seeing here? I um I ha I have difficulty seeing the chat. Okay, Cheddar is so talented. Is my mic working? No, I don't think so. If you were talking, I didn't hear. Yeah, I don't hear anybody, but I'm really amused by the chat, which apparently I have learned to identify this. Vivian, what kind of reasoning are we seeing here? Melissa?
really sure. Maybe.
Okay. Rebecca, what kind of reasoning are we seeing here in Teresa Tony's text?
Um, I'm not sure either, but I guess it would be a kind of reasoning where, you know, she tries to, well, I don't know the word for it, but I guess she tries to explain, you know, tries to balance off on both sides and, you know, tries to find a way to, I'm completely butchering this right now, but I think she tries to find a balance between the side of the students, you know. I'm not really sure.
Okay, okay. Erica?
Would it be inductive because she was taking people's like specific works and using them as evidence to apply it to what everybody could do?
Yeah, she's taking, here are some examples that illustrate this idea, and therefore she's going from specific examples to general. Javi, you raised your hand. Can you add to that?
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say something very similar. I honestly think she uses a little bit of both, inductive and deductive, because she does start with a lot of her bold claims are talking about specific strategies that academic writers use, and you know, then she goes back into like making that into a general claim that here's how you can do that yourself. And because I think a lot of the audience wonders like what specifically that strategy is and how they can apply it. And then in other terms, some of them aren't super specific, and I think that's just in general, a specific strategy isn't as specific, so it's more deductive, where she's using it as a general thing to like hone it in and use the examples from specific like notable writers to kind of like support that and bring that back into a more specific strategy.
Yeah, I think you're right. There are places where she's using deductive reasoning, but in the example that we were looking at from the strategy, we definitely saw inductive reasoning. Here are two examples, specific examples, and from those examples, she's drawing a conclusion that she's saying, let's go from specific to general, so it must be true. Later on, she's going from general to specific, is saying this is true always, and so therefore we must teach it to students. And so it's going in both directions, as Javi pointed out. Yeah. Oh, he is so cute. Puggles are adorable. They shed a lot, but they are adorable. Incidentally, it's nice for me to see Cheddar's picture, but Cheddar passed away about 1.5 years ago, and so he's no longer with us, but I enjoy those slides and I enjoy seeing Cheddar. And neither of my dogs now will balance food on their heads. So definitely not a thing all I will do. So yeah, one of the things the author could have done, the author of that strategy could have done, is to look at how this use of exemplification appeals to logos as well as ethos. And that would have made this analysis more focused on how Tony is persuading her primary audience. She is also assuming they have a lot of experience with scholarly journals, and she identifies these characteristics, they're going to say, oh yeah, I totally have seen that myself. So why focus on these analyses and the precis? Because your last essay of the semester is going to ask you to analyze how evidence, rhetorical strategies, rhetorical appeals all work to persuade primary audiences. And you are going to be making claims about how to persuade diverse audiences using a variety of genres. and you're going to be writing new analyses or revised versions of these analyses you've already done in your essay to illustrate your claims. You'll also be analyzing how you're using evidence strategies, appeals in your paper, considering your primary audiences. And so it's very much going to be a holistic discussion of how do you write to people? You know, like what, if you were going to talk to somebody about, you know, like what are the most important things? You're building that argument. You're going to be using sources we've read in class about writing in order to develop your ideas. So, questions? So you've got some homework assignments this week. You're going to watch a very short video on identities. You're going to complete an identity wheel activity, and then there's a journal. You're also going to read Eric Liu's article, What Every American Should Know, and write a reading journal. Using that article, you're going to join the discussion board with initial post on Thursday and respond to other students by Saturday. And you're going to write 2 paragraphs identifying the assumptions Liu makes about his primary audience. And of course, the reflection direction journal. Somebody asked when those papers would be, when I will have graded all those papers. And it takes a lot of time to do that. And so, and I really need to start by grading rough drafts for another 2 more classes that I'm reading. So I start with the rough drafts and then I have yours. It'll probably be in about a week and a half. It generally takes me 2 weeks approximately to get those graded. So very good question. So we have a few minutes and I want to introduce this article for you. The video is on Canvas on the week 7 wrap-up page, and you may want to watch the entire video because the video will help you understand. The article that you're going to read was initially published in Democracy Journal, and the title was How to Be American. It was republished in The Atlantic, which is a popular magazine, and the title was What Does Every American Need to Know? And it's important to note that it was published in 2016, right as we were moving into the election when Trump was elected. And so let me go ahead and I'm going to have a problem. I need to share computer sound. Let's watch about 3 minutes of this because I think it's going to set up the article for you really well.
Transcend, but actually embracing, I mean, back to New Orleans,
Sorry, let me
embracing the
take it to the
hybridity.
beginning.
Eric Liu, and I am the director of the Aspen Institute's new program on citizenship and American identity. I'm so pleased to have this session here in conversation with my friend Anne-Marie Slaughter, who is CEO of the New America Foundation, and somebody who, for many years in many ways, but particularly on the topic that we have this afternoon, has been shaping me long before we actually even met in person to talk about these topics. She was shaping me in her writing and thinking. So what I thought we would do here, just to give a little bit of the roadmap for our little less than an hour together, is describe a little bit the topic itself and the genesis of this topic that we're going to all be discussing here today. Anne-Marie and I will then have a little bit of a conversation about that topic. And then we really want to open it up for questions if you have questions, but as much just for your ideas and your input. I believe we've passed around copies of an article that that's just published in Democracy Journal that I wrote that is partly the catalyst for this conversation and for our theme. So come on in, folks. The topic, and this is like as the airplane is about to close its gates, if you are not here for How to Be American, feel free to get up and leave now. But if you are here, it is so exciting to have this conversation in such a full house and with so much energy here. This topic is one that is perennial, timeless, I think, for us here in the United States. But it's particularly timely right now. And what I thought I would do is describe a little bit in thumbnail what the argument is in this article, this essay that we've passed out, as a way to tee up the conversation Anne-Marie and I will have. And then also to kind of tee up an invitation that we're going to extend to you to offer up some ideas and input. So how many of you have heard of E.D. Hirsch? Okay, a few, but not all that many. So in 1987, E.D. Hirsch, then a professor of English at the University of Virginia, published a book called Cultural Literacy. And it was a very erudite book, 80% of which was just really with the education theorist's eye, talking about the necessity when you're reading and learning to read, the necessity for common knowledge, right? Common knowledge, not just, of course, actual literacy in English, but common knowledge, knowing references, understanding when people talk about a house divided, what they're referring to. When people talk about the shot heard round the world, what's being referred to. When they talk about various things that are part of our history, our culture, and our shared civic identity. And he wrote this book, 80% of which was this very kind of academic treatise, and the appendix of which was a list that he and two colleagues compiled of 5,000 things every American should know. In a fashion that must be a dream for any academic author, that appendix carried that book to the top of the bestseller list. It became this incredible phenomenon because that book came out just at the moment, we may remember, late 80s, early 90s, when a lot of these questions about multiculturalism, about political correctness, about the way we talk about who we are, was in this incredible period of flux. And this list that he produced of 5,000 things every American should know ended up on the cover of magazines. He ended up on the Today Show talking about this stuff. And he arrived at this moment of cultural anxiety in the United States. This sense that things were changing here and that the things that people should know, and indeed the people who decide the things that people should know, were beginning to be in flux, right? And that was exciting to some and very disorienting and disconcerting to many others. And E.D. Hirsch, come on in, folks. The topic, and this is like as the airplane is about to close its gate.
So I'm trying to stop that video, but I can't. Ah, there we go. It is now 1:51. I'm sorry for, I switched and I just couldn't figure out how to get out of the PowerPoint. That's what I needed to do in order for that to happen. The video is available on Canvas, but I think that sets up where Lou is headed, and that will help you understand the article. I'm happy to stick around for a few more minutes if you have questions, but otherwise, I'll see you on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Oh wait, actually, I have a quick question. So for the essay, whenever we turn it in, it's it says docs and then it says words. I mean, it says turn it in on Word, but then in parentheses like docs. So do we turn it into a docs file or
A doc or a docx file is a Word file.
okay, but do we can we submit it from Google Docs or do we have to turn it into Microsoft Word?
I need to have it a Word file so I can put it into the Kindle.
Okay,
But
sounds
you'll
good.
be able to convert it to a Word file from Google Docs.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye. Jenny, Rebecca? Nope. Jenny. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay. What would be the midterm for this class?
The midterm was the paper you just submitted.
Oh, great. Okay.
I
Okay.
know. Nothing else.
Okay.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.